What's up, Scout Army? This is Fuego Steve bringing you another edition of my DFS Fire podcast. Today I'm joined by Steve Renner. You may know him as SD Chickens in the Scout forums or on FanDuel. What's going on, Renner?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Great. We are still working out some technical difficulties, so hopefully everything sounds good on this pod, and we will keep working on them. Today, we are going to try to give you all some great info and help you win some big money this weekend in NFL. And we're going to go position by position, since I gave a little game recap review earlier in the week. And we're going to just get right to it and start off with quarterback. What do you say, Steve?
Let's go and get run down on it. And I definitely think that looking early in the week at the games is a smart way to go. And then by the end of the week, we can kind of narrow down our plays. But our way, who are you looking at quarterback this week?
I wanted to start with what I'm calling the big four this week in the two high-scoring games, Brady and Breeze and Rodgers and Ryan. I think that Rodgers and Ryan are going to carry a lot of ownership. They're playing the night game. It's high total. People love to have the late night hammer. And, with Brady and Breeze, it's also, they're both the highest totals on the board. I think they're going to be owned as well. I think out of the four of them, I think I'm eliminating Breeze at this point just because he's going against New England, and I think I'm having a hard time deciding between the other three. What are your thoughts?
Well, here's the thing. I don't care that much about the ownership among these four because they're all good, right? So if I end up getting the guy who's the highest of the four, I'm not going to sweat it too much because I think that the ownership, nobody's going to come in at like 40% or anything like that.
Right.
I'm all in on Rodgers this week. It's a couple things. One, I kind of work backwards on it. I don't like Brady and Breeze. As a matter of fact, I put them both up as fades for me. But I think Rodgers is going to come into this game, and Atlanta is actually the key stat that Atlanta has last year and in years past. Keep in mind, I'm a Saints fan, so I watch Atlanta a ton. They give up targets and passes to running backs higher than anybody else. And so the threat of a run game from the Packers is going to be negated because I think Rodgers is going to come out and he's going to throw it to Ty Montgomery 10 to 12 times in this game. And so, Aaron, with the game flow and everything, to me, I project he's going to be over 300 yards, total of 4 touchdowns through the air, and I think he's actually going to run one in this week. So one of my bold calls. So I'm all in on A-Rod to go back to Atlanta and get a little revenge.
Yeah, you're not alone, I don't think, in your sentiment with the Montgomery catching the ball out of the backfield, the short passes to Cobb and Adams. Atlanta is not good against the running back catching the ball, like you said, and I think that's a good way to look at it.
Now the one thing to consider here is that on FanDuel, Ryan is considerably almost $1,000 cheaper than Rodgers. So playing Ryan in cash on FanDuel, you can't go wrong there. And even if you roll him in the tournament, he still should hit pretty good value. Plus, Julio is going to be on a ton of lineups of mine. So I think either one of them are fine, but clearly I'm more on the quarterbacks in that game a lot more than the game in the Superdome.
Yeah, I agree, and you're right. DraftKings Rodgers is actually $100 less than Ryan, but Ryan's $1,000 cheaper on FanDuel. So maybe if you're playing both sites, get your exposure to Ryan on FanDuel, get your exposure to Rodgers on DraftKings. You could play it that way. That's one thing when pricing is different and in a way like that where they're opposite. That's a good way to attack them if you like similar players. Play them on one side or the other. I think, like I said, I'm off Breeze. I think if anything, I would be on Brady on the turf, pissed off that he lost, that kind of thing.
Well, so here's my take on this game. So the Saints have kind of come out and said that they're going to have Kenny Vaccaro shadowing Gronkowski. And that means two things to me. That means, one, that they're going to have 3 safeties on the field at all times. They're going to kind of do this kind of triangle defense where they've got a safety deep over the top, and they're going to make sure that Cooks doesn't beat him deep. That's one. And then two, McCarr is actually the Saints' best run stopper. So if he's out in coverage, chasing Gronkowski all over the field, I think the Patriots are going to come out and they're just going to turn around and hand it off to Gillislee or one of their many running backs that they have there, and just keep the game on the ground. And likewise on the Saints side, their best approach in this game, believe it or not, is to run the ball 40 times. Now, whether or not Sean Payton can actually stick with his game plan for an entire half, let alone a game, is yet to be seen. But I think that kind of my game script on this game is going to be that the Saints are going to run the ball. They've got two backup tackles in there, one of which is a rookie playing a second game, and I just don't see the two quarterbacks. They're going to throw probably for 300 yards, but I don't see them having a huge game.
Right. Great takes there. I want to talk about Newton and Wilson, and to a lesser extent, Tyrod Taylor, three quarterbacks that can also get it done a little bit with their legs. Newton and Wilson, Tyrod Taylor's even close to their price on FanDuel, but he's a lot cheaper on DraftKings. I like Newton. I like Wilson for a bounce back, and I think Tyrod Taylor's going to be sneaky. Any opinion on any of those guys?
Yeah, a couple of my least favorite guys. I like the Newton play as much as I don't like him as a quarterback. I can see the thing I said on Monday when I looked at this game is I'm like, man, this smells like a Cam Newton stat padding game, where he comes out and he, like you said, he rushes one or two in. It's always a threat. He does better at home. Buffalo, I don't think is going to stay in this game, so I don't like Taylor that much. Wilson, I get it. He's much better at home. He's done pretty well against the Niners. I just don't see the upside because I don't see how San Francisco scores to keep with them, right? And so, that Atlanta game, it's kind of obvious when we look at it and say, all right, Rodgers going to go down and score. Ryan's going to come right back down and score as well. A lot of quick strikes, a lot of passing. I think the Niners are going to try to run the ball, not very well. And, Wilson gets one or two touchdowns, and then they just go into cruise mode. So they're all in good spots. The one I'll kind of counter you on there that nobody's really touching on, probably because it has, really a low total, is Jameis Winston against the Bears.
I was going to bring him up next. Yeah.
Yeah, they've done a pretty good job covering the top receivers, but Winston throws to Evans a ton, and he had a decent game against the Bears last year. It's the first game, so I think people are kind of overlooking Tampa, and maybe there's a little narrative here with the hurricane and the Bucs coming back home and playing this game. But after Rodgers and Ryan, I actually remember if I had Winston third, and that's kind of a pivot off of the Cam Newton and Tyrod Taylor and Russell Wilson here that you mentioned.
Yeah, I agree. I like Winston. I haven't heard him being talked too much about. Actually, I heard him talked about a little bit in a negative way, but I like it. I like the fact that they've had time to prepare. Like you said, the hurricane, little narrative there, come out firing. I liked him coming into the season, and I think he's in a good spot this weekend as well. I was going to mention him next, along with just a couple other guys that wanted to get your opinion. Backing up real quickly to Tyrod Taylor, I think the reason I'm leaning a little bit towards him, especially on DraftKings where it's a lot cheaper, that if you want to go cheap at quarterback, because they're going to be losing, that what drives me to Taylor a little bit. Maybe he's going to have to, they're going to have to throw the ball, whether, McCoy will still be involved a little out of the backfield, but you have to throw more. He's going to have to do things in the air when stuff breaks down, maybe run with his legs. So that's kind of what I was considering.
Yeah, I can see it. The only thing is Carolina can be beaten over the top. And everyone was on Marquise Goodwin last week, and I think he dropped like 3 touchdowns. And I don't know who Taylor's going to throw to deep.
That's true.
So to me, I just don't see Buffalo hanging in the game with their offense. I think their best hope is that they pound McCoy as much as they can and try to shorten the game. I actually kind of like the Carolina defense a little bit too.
Yeah, I agree on that. I do like them as well. Any thoughts on Phillip Rivers or Big Ben? I know Big Ben's going against the Vikings, but he is at home. Phillip Rivers coming off a 3-touchdown game.
Then I like in a game stack. I actually would even be open to a Ben Bell or Tavis Bryant kind of stack because I think everyone knows that obviously Antonio Brown will be shadowed by Xavier Rhodes in that game. But Phillip Rivers just he doesn't do it for me.
I hear you.
I don't know what it is about him. I mean, I love Keenan Allen this week, and I think Keenan Allen on a heavy PPR site like DraftKings is one of the top plays. But I'm not going to do the correlation with Rivers, especially when Melvin Gordon's got such a good matchup there. So Rivers to me is going to come out. And he has too many games where he throws for like 240 and one touchdown.
What about sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, what about Bradford on the other side of that game? I'm off him. I think on the road, even though I do like Diggs and Thielen, I'm not. I don't think he's going to perform as well as he did at home the other night.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of times we take quarterbacks at home, and yeah, I don't want to touch Bradford at all this game. I do like a couple of the secondary guys. Like I said, if you're doing a game stack,
right?
I don't hate Diggs. I don't even hate Dalvin Cook, but I'm not going to roll Sam Bradford out there this week.
Yeah, I agree. One person I did want to mention was Derek Carr. He's obviously in a good matchup, but I think they are going to try to run the ball, or maybe he'll have a good first half, and then they start running the ball once they're up. They're playing the Colts, right?
Yep. Jets.
I mean the Jets, right? So, what are you going to Carr? Are you staying away from Carr?
No, this game is my favorite game. This is my top big game this week, and it's obviously the Raiders side. But I just kind of ruled this game out completely. I'm not going to touch Carr, not going to touch Lynch, not going to touch the receivers. I think the Jets keep it close, but that's kind of the upside play here. Okay, let's see if the Jets keep it close, are they going to take the lead and force Carr to have to throw a ton? Probably not. And if they don't keep it close, the Raiders won't have to run it up. So I think this is like a 30-9 final score. The Raiders score every which way they can. Maybe a tight end. Lynch rushes one in, and Carr throws for one other, but he only throws for like 200 yards or something like that. But yeah, I got no exposure to any of the Raiders.
Well, we're just gonna skip ahead while we're talking about what about the Raiders defense? You like the Raiders defense?
Yes, yeah, I don't mind the Raiders D. Hopefully the Jets will give them one.
Right.
So yeah, the Raiders defense is fine, but yeah, from offense wise, I'm not touching it at all.
Cool. Yeah, we're going to talk defense in a little bit, but we were talking everyone on the Raiders, so I figured we'll mention them because they're definitely on that side of the ball a good play, and I think because of that too, that's going to limit some of the offense, etc. So, any other quarterbacks? I think I don't have much. I mean, maybe Joe Flacco, maybe, but I think they're going to try to run the ball, and that'll be more of a punt play on DraftKings. And you got Prescott. I'm not going to play versus Denver. I'm not staying away from Wentz versus Kansas City, and I'm staying away from Palmer versus Indianapolis. I don't see him going off. Any other quarterbacks you wanted to mention or talk about?
Yeah, I agree with all the ones that you said no to there. So I get two other guys. One is Alex Smith, and I just there was something about the way that they were using him and Hill and Hunt, and they were keeping Smith mobile. I think that this game has a chance to be somewhat of a shootout. You get two coaches that are technically going up against their former teams, and they are under the same coaching tree. The Eagles' defense on the back end is, they were picked on last week. A lot of people wrote that prior. So I think that they can give up a couple deep touchdowns. So it's almost like, hey, Alex Smith had this really good game, and then nobody wants to play him this week because, as you mentioned, the Big Four are in great spots. I actually like Smith more than Big Ben, we mentioned earlier. And then my other one, my sneaky, is I think that the Redskins defense is atrocious, and I think Jared Goff is going to have another decent game this week. It's kind of my ballsy call at quarterback, but if I put in that third, fourth, fifth lineup, I'm going to roll out a Rams stack again. I think they're going to come out and win again this week, and I think that this has
Well, I will tell you my take. I like the golf take, but my take on Alex Smith is I hate him. I hate him as a fantasy quarterback, I should say. Last year, he did not throw 3 touchdowns in any game. So by him throwing 4 last week, the odds in my mind of him throwing 3 or more again this week are so slim, unless something was really revamped um, in this offense that I can't see him repeating the performance. What he had 368 yards and 4 touchdowns. Amazing performance last week. Um, I don't know if I could go there. I do like. Well, we'll talk about some KC players in a minute. All right, great takes there. Great takes there on quarterback. Let's move over to the running back position. With DJ going down, there's no more big 2 running backs. There's just one big one, and that's Lev Bell. What do you think it's going to do to his ownership? Is it going to now, I think this week might be a little different due to him bombing last week. I think you're actually going to probably get him for lower than most of the rest of the year this week. But in general, do you think his ownership's going to skyrocket most of the year because everyone's going to try to play him, or do you think it's going to get spread out between all the secondary backs?
I think, yeah, if you're talking for the season, it's definitely going to go up with DJ going down, which is definitely a bummer. Although I thought before the DJ news came out that Arizona they looked atrocious last week. They looked bad at the end of the season last year, and they were just heading in the wrong direction. But yeah, it's interesting. Lev Bell, at the beginning of the week, I was thinking, well, there's no way in hell that I'm going to touch him against Minnesota. And when you saw the other matchups and you said, well, I'm paying up a quarterback, I'm paying up a wide receiver, and people are going to jump on the value of running backs. But the more I thought about it, the more it kind of said, well, wouldn't it not shock you if, Pittsburgh at home, there's kind of this week one, they didn't give him a lot of touches almost as a punishment for holding out. That's over with now. Maybe they feed him the ball a ton, and he's the guy that scores a couple touchdowns against the Vikings. So I think he'll come in. Obviously, he'll be the highest on running back this week, but it's nowhere near what it was last week, right? And I think he's a great tournament play on both sides because of that upside and because he's so heavily involved. And like I mentioned earlier, if you're going to stack this game, don't be afraid to stack Ben with Lev Bell. He throws it to him a ton, especially in the red zone. And if they're going to go for 2, a lot of times they'll go to Lev Bell because Browns are going to be covered a lot. So I'm on him. He's in my list. He's not in my top 3, but he'll definitely be on. I would say probably half my lineups this week.
It's interesting because FanDuel, the pricing is really bunched up. He's $9,000, and then Ezekiel Elliott is $8,700, only $300 difference. McCoy $86, Freeman $81, all within $1,000 of Bell. But you go over to DraftKings, Bell's $98, drops to McCoy at $86, and then Elliott's $2,000 cheaper than Bell on DraftKings. So I think this may be based on his subpar performance last week, based on his extremely high price on DraftKings relative to some of these other guys. I think he's going to be lowest as we're going to get him going against the Vikings, that we may get him for a while. I'm not saying he's going to be low, but I could see maybe some other running backs coming in higher owned this particular week. Now, when he blows up this week and scores 2 touchdowns, but for 7 catches out of the backfield, et cetera, and 35 DraftKings points, he'll go back to the super highly owned. But I think at least that's what I'm hoping because I do like him as well.
But again, I don't care about ownership with a guy like Lev Bell, right? He's good for a reason. I agree. This is probably the lowest he'll be all season. It'd be interesting to see. I wouldn't be shocked if we see a lot of lineups on DraftKings where people go because of the flex, and they will use 2 value running backs with Bell this week. Most of the value guys that I actually don't like, but so yeah, it'll be curious to see where he comes in at, and that's something I got to look at a little bit more between now and Sunday.
Yeah, we're going to get to the value running backs in a while, but it's definitely something I could see happening is paying down for running back this week. or at least not going all the way up, where you could pay mid range and then a low, and then other spots. So that's a good point. Speaking of Elliott, I like Elliott this week at Denver. I think they aren't as good against the run as they are against the pass, and I don't think he's going to be super highly owned. I don't love him, but I like him this week. Do you like Elliott at all?
No, I don't. Matter of fact, I don't like Dallas at all in this game. And I I get the upside, and you can look at this and say, hey, he's probably got the suspension looming, so he's going to get the ball 25 times. And behind that line, he'll get 3 or 4 yards per carry, so he'll get 100 yards. He'll probably score once. I just, he's not making his way on any of my rosters this week. And part of that is I look at the value of someone like Elliott. So here's kind of the way to look at this, right? So if you're looking at, let's look at FanDuel in this case, where he's 8,700. You want to take 8,700 for Zeke, or do you want to go spend 8,800 for Julio Jones? I think you're going to immediately go Julio Jones, right? So I have more confidence in Julio getting over 20 points on FanDuel than I do Zeke getting that. And as we mentioned just a second ago, there's more value at the running back spot this week than there is at wide receiver. So it's kind of a roster construction play for me. But he's, I would go Zeke as a pivot off of Bell. On DK, he's actually a pretty good pivot off of a guy like Melvin Gordon, who I'm high on this week, and I think is on a lot of people's radar.
Let's talk about Gordon for a second. I think he's going to be one of the highest owned backs on the slate. He's got, he's playing Miami, who you can look at it as could be rusty, since they need to have that first game under the belt. You could look at it as they're going to be fresh, but either way, it's at home. It's the first opening game in LA for the Chargers, and I think they're going to feed Gordon the ball. Thoughts on him?
Well, the one thing with Gordon is he had 3 games last year where he went over 100 yards, which isn't that much for a guy that you think is kind of the feature back, right? I mean, he's 20 carries and a cloud of dust, really. But he scores so many touchdowns for them. And a guy that is touchdown dependent, that's over 7K, is someone you can fade. That said, I love the matchup against the Dolphins. We targeted running backs against the Dolphins a lot last year, and there's really not much indication to go away from that here.
Let me ask you, Renner. Let me ask you about the Melvin Gordon touchdown thing. So last year he was a machine, scoring every single game almost.
Yep.
The year before he was the longest streak maybe ever without a touchdown for a running back or some crazy thing like that. He didn't score at all. Is it going to even out this year, or was his rookie year an aberration and he's going to continue to score?
I'm trying to remember his rookie year, how the rest of the team did. I think it's somewhere in between. But the thing is, the other thing last year, you had Keenan Allen got hurt. Was it week 2? Or he got hurt really?
It may have been week 1. Yeah, it was week 1 or 2. Yeah.
So you got a healthy Keenan Allen out there. He's got a good matchup this week. You got to figure, all right, a lot of the touchdowns that he got last year were because there was no Keenan Allen. And you've got, look, they still got to get Gates the touchdown record. Owner Henry is just waiting to take over at the tight end position. So I think there's enough there for me to look at Gordon and say, you could fade and hope that he gets one of those 60 yards, catches for 30 yards, but doesn't score in any which way, shape, or form. I think he's favorable, but make no mistake, he's in the good spot. And I mean, him and Lynch are kind of the same this week, where you look at them and say they're guaranteed almost to get me, into the mid-teens.
Right.
In cash.
Right. For sure. And any of these other high, I know you're not on LaShawn McCoy, I assume. What about Devontae Freeman? I assume you like him in that night game.
I don't hate Freeman. I got a lot of Julio And so therefore I don't want to
have as much Freeman, right?
Yeah, I don't want as much Freeman. The other thing that scares me with Freeman is actually Tevin Coleman. I feel like Tevin Coleman is going to have a decent game here and get a lot of run for Atlanta. I don't hate Freeman, but he's not. I mean, I hate to give a middle of the road take on him, but he's probably not going to be on any of my teams.
Well, that's fine. What I've been doing is I just have been mixing up game stacks and or parts of that night game in that Atlanta Green Bay game. So some lineups I'll say I'll have Freeman and I'll have Rodgers and Nelson, or Rodgers and Montgomery and Freeman, and then maybe throw in Hooper. So if you're doing a game stack, that kind of thing. And then other ones, Ryan and Julio. So I think he's definitely in play. Not my favorite.
I'm just looking at Freeman. I want to double check the game log from last year. The two games against the Packers. I mean, he had 11 for 35, 4 catches for 23 yards in the regular season, and then obviously in the playoff game he had only 42 yards on the ground. I mean, that was a blowout. But yeah, I'm not big on Freeman this week. I just don't see him having a dominant game.
Right. And what about the other guy up in this range, at least on both sides, he's really up here, who is going to be popular, Kareem Hunt. Give me your feelings on Hunt this week, because I don't think I'm going there.
I'm not going there because he's not going to match what he did last week. I'd much rather go on the Dalvin Cook side of one of the rookies who's having a second good week in a row. I actually think Cook is going to meet what he did last week more than Hunt will do against Philly. He'll get you a good score. At 7,800 on FanDuel, will he get more than 2x? Probably not. Right. My pivot on FanDuel is actually to go to the guy that's almost identically priced, and that's Todd Gurley. I mentioned that the Rams are going to kill the Redskins. Everyone was on Gurley last week. He didn't look good, but they're going to give him the ball a lot more here, and I think they're going to be up, and I think Gurley scores again. So it's a little bit of a hot take, but I prefer Gurley over Hunt this week.
I like Gurley too. I agree. I think you can pair him up with the Rams defense again against Washington. I think I do like Gurley again. And speaking of rookies, you mentioned Dalvin Cook, Leonard Fournette, McCaffrey. We talked a little bit about Hunt. Any of the other rookies are you going to go back to this week? I think if anything, maybe McCaffrey, but I'm worried about Stewart because I kind of like Stewart at his cheap price. I don't think they're going to go away from Stewart as long as he's healthy. And Fournette, I'm not sure about. Thoughts on any of them?
Yeah, McCaffrey's the most dynamic, but you hit it on the head there. You got Stewart, you got Greg Olsen, you got Kelvin Benjamin both up this week, and you got Cam, running it in himself at the one. Plus, the problem with McCaffrey is Cam sucks at throwing the 5 to 10 yard pass, and he's throwing 100-mile-an-hour bullets behind McCaffrey. It's like, dude, put a little touch on the ball. If they can find a better way to get the ball in McCaffrey's hands, then I would love it. He would be the only one of the rookies, the other rookies you mentioned there that I would touch this week. I don't like Foreman. I just think that Jacksonville Tennessee game all around.
Right. I agree. I'm not on any of them in that game. I'm off Murray this week with DeMarco Murray in that game against the tough Jacksonville D. I'm not sure they're going to repeat last week's performance, but their D is improved. And so I'm not going to – I don't think – Tennessee's defense isn't horrible. So I'm not going with the Fournette. I think we mentioned Gurley in that price range. You touched on Lynch, that you were going to fade Lynch. I think I like him better than you, and I like Dalvin Cook a little less than you. What about Jordan Howard or I don't think I'm going back to Cohen. Yeah. So I think if anything, I would play Howard in that case, but I'm nervous about that as well. The one guy that I kind of like, I don't think a lot of people like this week, is Jay Ajayi. I understand that the Chargers got to improve defense, or supposed to at least, and I kind of like the Chargers defense going against Jay Cutler, but This is a guy we saw that's rushed for 200 yards twice last year. They've been rested up. They haven't played it all week. They're pumped up, ready to go. Also the hurricane narrative. Now it is on the road, but any like to Jay Ajayi?
Not a ton. I actually wrote up that I bumped up Devontae Parker because with Jason Barrett, I think it's confirmed that he's going to be out this Sunday. I think that the Dolphins are going to be able to pass the ball in San Diego. That's going to open up the passing game, and I don't know who's going to cover a big guy like Parker. I don't hate Jay Ajayi's matchup, but I'm not going to. I don't see him having a huge game this week. I agree with you on avoiding the Bears backfield situation altogether. I think Cohen's not going to do it again this week, and if he does, fine, I'll take that loss. But it's for me, it's a matter of on the running back spot, and it's kind of the same thing with the quarterbacks. Yeah, you could go through 8 or 9 guys that you're like, oh, he's in a decent spot, but I try to narrow it down. And one of the things I did a write-up on this earlier this week was at the running back position, when it comes down to 2 guys and I got to decide, I take the one who's at home and favored. And for me, in the Ajayi Melvin Gordon matchup, even though I kind of shit on Melvin Gordon a few minutes ago, I'm going to lean with the home guy and think that he's home, he's favored. They tend to perform a little bit better there. So I'm not a big Jay Ajayi guy. So
right, yeah, those are good points. We talked about our love for Montgomery. He on DraftKings he's only $5,800, and it's interesting. The running backs are really very tightly compact on FanDuel. There's not a lot of dropping. It's like they're dropped by 100 to each player. He's only 6,500 on FanDuel, so he's not expensive per se. But I found it interesting that Jacquez Rodgers, who I do like a little this week, is 6,600 on FanDuel, $100 more than Montgomery. But Jacquez Rodgers on DraftKings, for example, is only 4,400, 1,300 less than Montgomery. So we like Montgomery. We know that. Any love for Rodgers?
A little bit, but and this is where it becomes site dependent. So right there, you can take Montgomery and Rodgers, all right, and plug them both in at running back and build out your team. And I bet you can get Le'Veon Bell in the flex on DraftKings. And that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, is that there's some guys on DraftKings who are so down on the pricing, but are projected to get a decent amount of volume, kind of in that $4,000 range at running back this week, that it's worth just saying, you know what, I'm going to lock in a Lev Bell or a Zeke or one of the top end running backs who I know is going to get high volume. And in tournaments, just lock in 3 running backs. So that's kind of the way I see the structure working out on DK on FanDuel. I'm all in on Montgomery, and obviously he's a little better on DraftKings because of the price and the extra half-point PPR. But he's the first guy that I'm plugging into my lineup with Rodgers for a tournament. I'm going Rodgers, Montgomery, and I'm praying he hits him twice for a touchdown.
Yeah, I think Montgomery is in an excellent spot. Let's talk a little more about the value running backs. Kerwin Williams, more so on DraftKings than FanDuel, but I'll list here some of the DraftKings guys. I like Terrence West. These are some guys. I do like Terrence West, but you got Terrence West, you got Kerwin Williams, C.J. Anderson. I've heard a little talk about Thomas Rawls. We mentioned Jonathan Stewart, Jacquez Rodgers. Any of these value guys or any value guys that you see? I've heard Alvin Kamara at 3,500 on DraftKings. Any of the value guys? I like the Ravens guys, Buck Allen and West a little bit, but what's the split going to be? You got James White at 4,000 on DraftKings. Any of these value backs you like?
Yeah, so I'm going to take it each by game there because you mentioned a couple split situations. So Seattle is the first one where you got Rawls and you got Carson in there. So I'm not touching the situation there because we don't know what we're going to get. But like you mentioned earlier, Russell Wilson's in a decent spot to do well. So I don't want to deal with guys getting 10 to 12 carries and praying that they hit one big. The Baltimore situation, I liked West at the beginning of the week. It sounds like it is going to be a little bit more split. So I'm probably not going to end up with him. I actually like the other side there where I think Isaiah Crowell is going to get a heavy volume and is going to run pretty well, and the Browns are going to keep this game close. I hate Arizona. I'm completely, I don't see how. I'm actually shocked that Arizona is favored by 7. And I get that the Colts are
Putrid.
horrible,
Yeah.
to put it lightly. But I mean, you're still going on the road, and Arizona did not look that good last week. They just lost their best player. That one's interesting to me, and I see that it looks like most of the money is on the Cardinals. So if you're placing a bet, I put it on the Colts this week. So
yeah,
I don't like that backfield. The Saints are going to run the ball a ton, and Kamara is the guy that I thought was going to be the main target in this game because he's a good pass catcher. They can move him all over the field, put him in the slot. He's kind of the new joker on this team. But the more that as the week is going on, I've really got the feeling that Mark Ingram is going to be involved heavily running between the tackles here. So
yes,
I don't mind taking a shot with Ingram and Kamara. It sounds like I'm hearing a lot more people go towards Kamara as kind of the trendy, sexy pick, which anytime, people who know me about Mark Ingram, if I get Mark Ingram at 5%, I'm doing the hashtag Angry Ingram narrative. Dude didn't get the ball much last week. Everyone's saying Peterson didn't get the ball. Ingram didn't get the ball at all.
Oh, I know. I played him.
Which is a little shocking to me. And I think the Saints are going to come out and they're going to have to run this ball a ton. And the upside is nobody throws the ball to the running back more than the Saints. Well, maybe the Patriots, but
Ingram got 4 catches. Down. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, even if they're down, I mean, you look at the receivers they got. They got Mike Thomas, who got us who Belichick's going to take away, and then you got Fleener, Gibb, Brandon Coleman, because with Willie Snead being out, so people are pointing out the fact that the Saints running backs are really their second and third best receivers, and so they're going to have 2 of these guys on the field at all times. Whether or not they get the ball out of the backfield doesn't matter because they're going to get targeted. So I think Ingram, and looking at his price on DraftKings, he's a bargain right there with Kamara.
Yeah, I agree. I like Ingram too. And when I was interrupted you, I was saying he got like 4 catches, I think, on the last drive. When they were playing prevent defense, and it like maybe saved me. And the rest of my lineup didn't. I think I cashed, but yeah, it was. He can catch just as well as Kamara. So that's a good call there.
And the other thing that I haven't heard one person mention is the Saints. They came into the season without Terrell Armstead at left tackle, so they had the rookie Ramczyk starting there at left tackle. They lost Zach Street in the game last week, and he's out this week. So I haven't even heard of who they're going to slide into right tackle. But I mean, you got to figure, and I know Hightower's out for the Patriots, but that ball is going to be out of Breeze's hands really quickly, quicker than normal. So, and that's going to go to Kamara. It's going to go to Ingram. Peterson will get involved in the game. I mean, you're going to see John Kuhn. Wouldn't shock me if he scored one here. So, but yeah, the Saints backfield. This is why I don't like Breeze, and this is why I don't like Brady. I think the running backs are the play in this game.
That's a great call, great take, and I take that. Not a lot of people are gonna go to the running backs, and I think you could even do the running backs on the New England side as well. Gillislee, James White, as well. I think we're ready to move on to wide receivers. Anybody I missed you want to talk about?
No, I mean, you mentioned Gillislee there, and he's leading in the Patriot backfield, but Belichick is just as tough as Sean Payton to predict as far as running backs.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move along then to wide receiver. Antonio Brown, every week he's in play, although we already mentioned Martavis Bryant. Antonio Brown's going to be locked on by I'm blanking. Yeah, exactly. Xavier Rose on Minnesota. That doesn't necessarily going to stop him, but it could slow him down enough that Ben Roethlisberger goes to Bell goes to Martavis Bryant, maybe even, dare I say, Jesse James again. Any love for Brown?
No, I have zero Brown, and I will probably have zero Brown this week. Look, it's one of those things where we missed him last week. He was the play over Bell, and I'm not going to chase it this week, even though, like you said, he's in play every week. But there's a stat that I saw, and unfortunately, I got to go look it up. But Ben at home with Martavis Bryant in the lineup.
Right.
It's some crazy stat where Ben has got a ridiculous quarterback rating, and he's throwing for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns every single time. So, yeah, I mean, if you're going to this game, to me, like I said earlier, I'm going Ben. I'm going to go Lev Bell and Martavis Bryant. And on the other side, I might go Dalvin Cook or Stephon Diggs, just to play the correlation game there. But no Antonio Brown for me. It's all Bryant and Lev Bell.
Right, and it makes sense too, since we both like Julio Jones, who's less than him. It makes sense for us not to have very many, if any, Brown shares.
Yeah, so on Julio, guess his ownership this week.
This past week?
No. This week coming up. What do you think it's going to be?
I'm going to say it's going to be 30%.
Let me check his price, make sure. All right. I think he might be 40.
No.
Because everyone I've heard, and just looking around and kind of look at the common trend, when you combine the skill positions, the running back and receiver, he's the top guy everywhere. And it's almost like, oh, you're going to get Julio Jones, right? I think he's going to be on almost everyone's lineup. That doesn't mean we fade him, right? I mean, it's one of these deals where good players are chalked for a reason.
Right.
But I think it's going to be insanely high.
I agree, and throw in. I'm going to keep harping on it. You throw in that night game, that adds to it. So I agree. I think he's in a great spot. Now, last year, I'm going to take a look real quick at his game logs. So he had 4, if you count the playoffs, games with 3 touchdowns. 5 games with 3 touchdowns. Am I seeing that right? No, that's targets. Excuse me. No, he had none last year. Okay, exactly. He had none with 2 or 3 touchdowns. He had no multiple touchdowns except for Green Bay Packers in the playoffs. Are you concerned about multiple touchdowns?
Not a ton.
Okay.
The other thing to consider with Julio is that he was hurt a lot of the second half of the season last year. So
True.
Plus Atlanta, they were blowing teams out in a lot of cases, and they didn't have to use him as much in the red zone. He looks healthy now, and even if he only scores once, I think he's going to go over 100 yards. And the problem with Julio, though, is if I don't play Julio, where's my pivot? The next guy I like is actually Mike Evans.
Me too. That's what I was going to say. You could go to Mike Evans considering his price, especially on FanDuel. Jones is 88, Evans is 85.
It's a much tougher matchup. The only thing I'm playing Evans for is the fact that I know Winston is going to force him the ball. And Evans is a physical guy, so I'm hoping that he goes up, gets away with the push-off, and comes down with it. It's a long stretch. Whereas Julio, the volume's going to be there. It's going to be a high-scoring game. So it's not as safe of a pivot. It's not like last week where running back, you had 2 running backs and you could easily say, all right, they're both in great matchups. Which one are you going? Now, the pricing was so soft, everyone took both, and they both sucked. But I just want to see where the pivot is. And it might be, the more we think about it, it might be Antonio Brown, but just ruled that out too. So every which way I try to find a path to fade Julio, I don't.
Well, speaking of that game, do you like Sanu or Gabriel? Because you could pair Ryan with one of them, knowing that everyone else is going to play Julio, and get some. Obviously, if you're game stacking and you're stacking Ryan, you could stack him with Julio and Sanu and Gabriel if you chose. I don't love them. I like Sanu a little more. And in that same game, we have Nelson, Cobb, and Adams for Green Bay. Any of those,
Sanu for sure. Sanu scored against Green Bay both times last year.
Okay.
He would be the guy that I would go with if you jump off Julio, but quite frankly, you could go both, right? So if you're going Ryan, I think you go Ryan, Julio, Sanu.
Mm-hmm.
If you go Rodgers, I mentioned I'm going Rodgers, Montgomery, which seems to be an odd trend of mine this week to go the quarterback with the running back. But and then I'm looking at either Adams or Cobb. I play Jordy Nelson at home. I don't play him on the road. His home road splits as far as touchdowns are insane. Plus, Atlanta's top quarterbacks are probably the strength of their defense. So it's, to me, I want to get Cobb kind of line up in the slot. I think he had the better games against them last year. So that's kind of the correlation. I'm going Rodgers, Montgomery, Cobb with Julio on the other side.
Right. Great points there. The other high-scoring game that we discussed, projected high-scoring game, the New England and Saints game, you have Brandon Cooks coming back to New Orleans, and you have Chris Hogan also on the Patriots, and on the other side you got Michael Thomas, you got Ted Ginn, who I don't know why I always like Ted Ginn, but I like Ginn as a lower-owned receiver in that game. And I think Cooks is going to do well. What do you think?
So Cooks can get the volume. I wouldn't play him on FanDuel at 7,900 where it's a half-point PPR. But I could see them coming out and force-feeding him the ball. And I know he's more on DraftKings, but that extra half-point bonus PPR I think will make up for it where, he gets, 9 to 10 touches.
Yeah, Brady and Belichick like to stick it to people too. So if you believe in any narrative at all, they say, you know what, here's Brandon Cooks, here you go, and like you said, shove it down their face.
So here's the thing about this. You talk about the narrative here. Belichick and Peyton technically get along. They're both from the Parcells tree and all that. But the whole trade with Cooks this offseason was really this big kind of chess match because the Saints were going after, Butler in the trade, and then Belichick kind of manipulated it so they couldn't get Butler. And then the Saints left them empty-handed because they said, all right, well, we'll just take the first-round pick, and they ended up getting Lattimore to fulfill the quarterback. So I've heard some talk about the fact that both these coaches, both teams might have been looking ahead to this game, just to kind of stick it on each other. And trust me, if anybody carries a grudge, it's Peyton and Belichick. Cooks, I think he's going to get the ball a ton because of the narrative. But then again, I said Adrian Peterson was going to get the ball a ton last week because of that narrative. And look how that works out. So
right.
I get a buddy of mine who, let's start all season long in baseball, he said there's a trend that pitchers going against the former team have got rocked. And sure enough, it's happened. And I said to him after the Peterson game, I said, well, maybe your trend's going to carry over to football this year. That's probably me doing wishful thinking because I'm worried that Cooks is going to destroy New Orleans. But I don't see him hitting an 80-yard run. Could he get the volume? Absolutely. And, for the Saints, I mentioned earlier, I think it's a running back game. I think it's a Kobe Fleener game. Thomas will do decent. Ginn's a home run guy. If he gets that one big catch, it pays off for you. But I don't have any receivers on the Saints. I will probably do one, have Cooks as a one-off here or there. I actually like Chris Hogan a little bit more than Cooks this week, though.
Yeah, Hogan's in a good spot as well. He's only 5,600 on DraftKings, for example. And you never know with Belichick, and you never know. They could use Cooks all day as a decoy. It would anything happen that Belichick does would shock me. Or Cook starts stretching the field and Hogan stretching the other side or coming underneath. But without Amendola, without Edelman, Gronk, who we'll talk about in a minute, they have their options. So you're not on Dez, I assume, because we're off that Cowboys game. And some of the other higher end, Baldwin. So these are some of the guys I kind of like, actually. Baldwin, Kelvin Benjamin, Tyreek Hill. I'm going to go back to Terrell Pryor. Any of those guys interest you?
Not a ton. Pryor a little bit, just because I'm going with the game script that the Rams are going to blow out Washington and the Skins can keep it close. And, he would obviously be the main target for the Redskins or one of the main targets for them to stay in that game. My next guy, after Julio is like I said, Mike Evans, and it's entirely just Winston and Evans. It's kind of my contrarian pairing of the week. And then I'm finding that I'm on a lot of the middle tier guys. So Keenan Allen, I mentioned, is a great pivot. If you don't play Melvin Gordon, he should get a ton of catches. He always does. Devontae Parker's got a good matchup. I think Tyreek Hill is going to have a big game for the Chiefs again that nobody's really talking about.
Right.
I mentioned Cobb with Rodgers. We mentioned Martavis Bryant, and the last one is Stephon Diggs. It's hard to imagine him getting 2 touchdowns again, certainly, but the guy's a PPR machine, and if Bradford is having to get the ball out quickly, he's obviously the main target, him and Rudolph.
And he's super cheap on both sides, only 61 on DK, 65 on the FanDuel. Love Diggs. I love, I wouldn't say I love him, but I like him, especially, I don't like Bradford, but that's one thing in DFS. You can like a receiver and not necessarily like the quarterback, because Diggs could get 130 yards and a touchdown, which is a good game, great game, and Bradford can only get 220 yards. So I agree. And I was going to say, you have to like Tyreek Hill, especially if you like Alex Smith. You got to like Tyreek Hill. I like pairing Tyreek Hill actually with the Chiefs defense. We'll talk about the Chiefs defense in a minute. I don't love it's funny. I don't love the Chiefs defense by themselves, but I like them paired with Tyreek Hill. And I agree on that good tier there. We already talked about Devontae Adams in that tier. I even like Deshaun Jackson a little for Tampa Bay. If you're playing Winston, you could play Winston, Evans, and Jackson if you really wanted to. Any love for Fitzgerald? I guess not, because you're not on the Cardinals game, right?
No. Yeah, I think all and with football, always see this where you don't see it coming, but at the beginning of the year, it's like all of a sudden it's like, wow, these guys aged and they're completely done it. And Fitz, I'm not saying that about Fitz, but Palmer just looked horrible last week. And I think Arizona's going to get run out of the building by the Colts. Well, I shouldn't say run out of the building. I think they're going to look like crap against the Colts.
Right.
So, yeah, no love for Fitz. The other thing, too, is when we're talking about the receivers and pairing with quarterbacks, or we mentioned tournament plays, the thing that I've always had success with is you got to play the correlation game where you say, all right, if I'm going to do a stack of 2 guys or 3 guys, who am I correlating with on the other side to get the game script for it to stay kind of even and on pace?
Great.
When you build that core, then it's a matter of saying, all right, who are the one-offs? Who's just a solid play to plug in there? So something like Diggs, even if you don't go to Pittsburgh, Minnesota route, or even Marty B, let's say we go with the stack of doing the night game like we talked about, and you can go in there and you can get Julio or you can get Cobb, and then you're sitting there with your third wide receiver, plug in Martavis Bryant or Stephon Diggs as the one-off, because you already have your core, and then it's just, I just need a guy that's going to get me that safe floor, someone that's got a good matchup in there. So, building the correlation is key, and then also, when you fill in the one-offs, I don't want to fill in a one-off with the guy that's high upside, because my core is the high upside. I just want a guy that's going to give you good return.
Great point. People, I always talk about ceilings in GPPs, but that's not always the case. You need certain guys with floors. You don't want all floors. Like you said, you're going for the high end on the one side, stick in some floor guys. That's a big thing we're going to talk about during the NBA season. But there's some great points.
It's like in baseball. Don't be a dumbass and roster, J.P. Crawford and Andrew Knapp in your lineup. Okay, basically.
Exactly. So I guess we're off the Raiders receivers, and so we don't need to talk about them. The the San Diego receivers, Keenan Allen. You said you liked a little. Travis Benjamin, Tyrell Williams. I like Keenan Allen a little.
I love Keenan Allen this week.
Okay. And any of I'll tell you what's interesting to me. You said before, Jordan Matthews on Buffalo is interesting to me. If we think, you said he's got no one to throw too deep. Well, Matthews maybe doesn't go deep, but he might get some volume. And I talked a little bit about this in my Chalk article, Kelvin Benjamin as well. Kelvin Benjamin, a lot of people were on Kelvin Benjamin. He drew a high ownership last week. Well, I think Buffalo's, I had it before here. It'll take me a minute to find it, but can't remember who Benjamin's going up against Buffalo. But I think he's in a good spot again. You're going to probably need a deep play, but I don't mind going back to guys like Kelvin Benjamin, to guys that the week before disappointed, but are still in a good spot this week that the public may not want to play because they let him down the week before.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, don't be short-sighted. Forget what you looked at the week before, and also don't forget, if you were attacking a team the week before for a reason, go back to it. I do like Benjamin. If you're going, if you believe in that game as far as the game script, I wouldn't play him as a one-off though.
Okay, interesting. And I don't know any love for Mike Wallace or Jeremy Maclin going against the Browns for Baltimore.
No, not much.
Not much here on this end. Let's see. There's someone. Let's see. Pierre Garçon. Would you play him? Isn't one of the cornerbacks supposed banged up or might be out for Seattle?
No.
They're going to play? Okay. I thought someone was.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's about it. Any other receivers? Personally, I don't like paying way down for receivers. This is just my opinion. I don't like going there when you're already crossing your fingers that your receivers get targeted and get catches, that I just don't like, punting wide receivers or anybody super low at receivers, in my opinion.
I agree. Unless it's, super obvious, and if you do, maybe in a stack. So just my one, I guess, long shot call at wide receiver is that Torrey Smith catches a touchdown this week.
There you go. That's a good call there. What about Cooper Kupp? Any love for him?
I like Cooper.
Okay.
I like him more for the season. But, I mentioned earlier, golf is kind of my sneaky play. So I have both Cooper and, as I mentioned, Gurley is someone that's in play as well. But, also looking at the Rams defense in that game too. I see the Rams scoring somehow, some way. And it's, that's one of those games that I got to put a little more thought into. But yeah, I don't mind Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, I love that name. Great name. Would you go to Alshon Jeffrey against Kansas City?
No. We mentioned earlier we both don't like Wentz a ton on the road there. I like Smith, and because Smith with Hill, my correlation play was actually to go with Torrey Smith in that game. Alshon, he's never dependable enough for me. For some reason, whether it's the injuries or it just feels like he's always going kind of at 80%. So I think Wentz is going to be either check down to Ertz or his backs, or throw one deep to Torrey Smith.
Right, and you just backing up a quick second. You had mentioned Parker before, Devontae Parker. You got Jarvis Landry, you got Parker, you got Kenny Stills. Like you said, Verrett's going to be out for San Diego. Do you still like Parker, right?
I do a ton. He's in my core four, if you will, at wide receiver this week.
Okay.
And he's someone that this is always good. To pick guys without even looking at their price. I haven't checked what his price is on FanDuel. I'm just looking at that now.
That's a great point. Just to touch a little bit on that, pricing is huge in DFS, obviously, for obvious reasons. But if you can decide on people you like without looking at their price, then go in and make the decisions. Then just look, see, can you get? Let's say you listed you listed a complete lineup without even looking at price. Now, I never do that because I'm in there so early. But let's say you did that, and then you go in and make that lineup. Oh, okay, great. Oh, well, if it doesn't work, well, then you got to start making adjustments here and there. But to get on guys and to not get off them specifically, I made the mistake last week. I was all over Jacksonville on FanDuel because of their cheap price, but I really like them anyway going against Tom Savage, and I thought that'd be a contrarian play on DraftKings. But what did I do? I ended up paying up for Houston. I ended up paying for some of these other guys instead of Jacksonville because I wasn't paying up for them on FanDuel, and it was a mistake. I should have put Jacksonville in more. I maybe had them in one on DraftKings, and that's you do play it differently between the sites based on price without a doubt. But if you like someone on one site, you don't necessarily, especially defense. We're not talking catches and things like that. Make sure you play them on both. So.
Yep, I did the same thing last week. Plus with Parker this week, the news, about Barrett being out is kind of coming out late. So I think the quote unquote sharps, as they call them, will be on him a little bit, but he's going to be super low owned because everyone's going to look at this and say, oh, well, the numbers say this is a bad matchup for him, and a lot of people still don't believe in Jay Cutler. So yeah, Parker is, if I get chalked with Julio and one of the Green Bay receivers as my correlation, this is where I'm going to have Parker in one lineup, like Keenan Allen in another, Marty B, Stephon Diggs, and roll from there as kind of a one-offs.
Great calls there. All right, then let's move along to tight end. We'll talk about Gronk first. Let's see, he's at New Orleans in that high-scoring game. We already talked about Cooks being targeted. I think Gronk's going to be popular as he is when he's healthy. Do you like Gronk this week?
This one's tough. As a Saints fan, they get torched by tight ends all the time. They're usually more the middle-of-the-road tight ends that beat them. I mean, you saw Rudolph was wide open last week. The Saints do have a completely different linebacking core. They're much faster, and as I mentioned at the beginning, Kenny Vaccaro is going to be shadowing Gronk in this game. So, Gronk, look, if they get inside the 5 or the 10, the Saints don't have anyone physical enough to handle with them. So, I think we get Gronk getting somewhere in like the 60 yards and probably scoring a touchdown to where he gets you enough points. But it's not enough to where, if you fade him, you're going to get killed. Plus, when's the last time Gronk, he was always hurt, it seems like. When's the last time he had that huge game on the road, specifically?
Right.
I think we're worried about fading him because of the name, and the name carries a little bit more than the actual reality at this point.
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't think he had any big, he was hurt second half of the year, but even before that, I don't think he had any monster. No, he had no games with over one touchdown. He had some big yardage games, but no, they weren't any of those 3 touchdown games that we saw maybe the year before that. So
yeah, I'm looking at the 3 touchdown game that he had was first game of the season against Pittsburgh in 2015. Yeah, first game of the season at home. And then he had a stretch. He's getting 100 yards, and a touchdown. Look, he's the best tight end in the game, but do you feel more comfortable about Gronk or Julio? Again, this is why I think Julio comes in at 40%.
Yeah, you're right. 8,100 Gronk is on FanDuel, where Julio's 88. Yeah, 8,100 is, it's a little better on DraftKings. Yeah, interesting the way the pricing is this week. Kudos, FanDuel. Kudos. Yeah, those are all great points, and I think if you want, he's more of if I have a really good lineup I like, and I haven't set my tight end, and I have a lot of money, let's do it. But if not, well, there's other places we can go. The other high end tight ends, you got Greg Olson, Jordan Reed, Travis Kelsey, Jimmy Graham. I think personally, I think they're all in play this weekend. To be honest with you, um, any of the big guys there. Jack Ertz is kind of expensive. Delaney Walker at Jacksonville. All those guys are in that next tier. I think I like. I think. I think I like Kelsey the best, to be honest with you. But I could see any of I could see Kelsey more on DraftKings where he's cheaper at only 5,100 as opposed to the second highest at 67 on FanDuel and get my exposure to some of these other guys. Any of those love for those other popular or name brand tight ends as I'll call them.
Yeah, so this is a little bit of my dilemma. I like them all. I think they're all about the same. I don't love them all though. So there's no, as much as I say, hey, Gronk is not going to kill you if you fade him. Yeah, I'd love to sit here and say, hey, I'm going to go pivot to like a Martellus Bennett or Zach Ertz, and I'm not touching Jimmy Graham right now. He just doesn't look right. He's never looked right with Russell Wilson. Greg Olson, I think, is in a good spot, but that game could easily get out of hand and become a running game for them. So the guy that I'm actually kind of leaning towards that I think is going overlooked is Kyle Rudolph. And I mentioned earlier
Are you looking? Are you looking at my sheet here? Are you looking at my upcoming sheet? Go ahead.
Yes, I am. No, we mentioned that with Diggs and the PPR angle, Bradford loves throwing the Kyle Rudolph. Pittsburgh's been known to not really care about the tight end too much, and I can see them just saying, "Hey, you want to check down to Rudolph for 3 yards, 5 yards, 3 yards, right? Go right at it." So Rudolph is my top non-Gronkowski tight end this week. I get a hunch that Delaney Walker scores a touchdown, but it's not strong enough of a hunch to feel confident about it in that tough matchup. And then I mentioned, Gates. There's narrative that he's got to score at some point.
And he's home this week. That's right. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and he's home this week. But you made a good point there. Tight end this week for me is I'm going to fill in my other positions, and usually like on FanDuel, I start with defense, kicker, and tight end, and I lock them in, and then I say, okay, I can manipulate everything else. But for me this week, tight end is probably going to come in at the end. I do like Hurts. I do like Hurts, as I mentioned before. I think he's going to be Wentz's top target there. But it's really a position this week. I think if you want to go sneaky, go sneaky. Play for that one touchdown.
Yeah, you mentioned Rudolph. I love Rudolph this week. He was in the Monday night game last week, so it was funny on that slate. He was extremely highly owned, but I think people, because he was on Monday night, he didn't have a big game. People are going to forget about him, and he's only 5,500 on FanDuel. He's only 4,200 on DraftKings. I love Rudolph in this spot. I want to touch back on Martellus Bennett, who you mentioned. Yeah, he's 5,800, which is not cheap on FanDuel, but on DraftKings he's only 3,900. You get if you're stacking up the game, I could see him playing opposite of Ryan and Julio. Or if you just wanted a piece of the game, but you're not stacking up that night game, to maybe throw Martellus Bennett in there at tight end. I didn't realize until doing my research that he had 6 targets last week. I thought he had less than that, and that's a decent amount for Aaron Rodgers tight end.
Yeah, it is. And again, that's another look. Rodgers. The other reason why I like Rodgers here, they get inside the 10. I feel like Rodgers is throwing it. I mean, you can just see Rodgers is going to go out. He's going to start scrambling out to the right. They come back to the left. And he's going to run around. They're not going to run the ball there, so he's going to look to throw it. And whoever gets open,
is who he's going to nail to. So, Bennett's in a good spot. One guy who, if you want to go for a 2% owned tight end play this week, O.J. Howard. Um, Kid had,
Love
the
it.
rookie
Love
coming in.
it.
Yeah, I mean, he was highly touted. We saw Austin Hooper. It was kind of a fluke touchdown, but he still torched the Bears last week for one. And if there's concern, people aren't on Evans because of the way the Bears quarterbacks lined up. I still think the Bucs are going to score, and then Howard would be a good long shot 2% on guy to take a shot on this week.
It's a great call. He's only 2,900 on DraftKings. I want to touch back on Hooper for a second. He had a big game last week, but he only had 2 catches, 2 targets, and one of them was
one game on 1 touchdown or 1 pass. Yeah,
exactly. But the funny thing is, I kind of liked him going into the week, but I even said to myself, he's not gonna the first game, blah 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 blah. And meanwhile, he did, even though it was on one play. He's also in that high scoring game. He's only 3,500 on DraftKings. He's more expensive. He's 5,500 on FanDuel. Any love for Hooper?
Yeah, a little bit. He was actually on my main FanDuel tournament lineup last week. I had
nice.
Yeah, that was all I had. It was one of those things where I did what you mentioned earlier. I had in my cash lineup, I had the Jaguars and had the red kicker and everything. And on my tournament lineup, I had the Texans with Ryan, Julio, and Hooper. And so it just sat there right below the cash line on that. But yeah, that one touchdown put me in for a while. But yeah, I like Hooper in this game. For me though, because I'm locked in on Julio, I would only go Hooper if I have a Matt Ryan lineup, which is probably going to be more on FanDuel than it is DraftKings. So, because you're going to play for that correlation there. But yeah, I'm high on Hooper for the season for sure. I'd probably list him as 6 or 7 though this week for me at tight end.
Right. Yeah, I think exactly. If you're taking part of the game sack for sure, he's in play, no doubt. And back to the other high-scoring game, Kobe Fleener. Any love for Fleener? I think you could get him. I don't think you're going to get him at super low owned, but he could be a guy who gets maybe in the end zone or gets a couple catches if they're covering, Michael Thomas, that kind of thing.
I hate Fleener.
Yeah.
He frustrates me so much. He'll be running a route, and there were too many times last year where Brees throws a perfect pass down the middle of the field, and you see the receiver going up, and all of a sudden you see Kobe Fleener running right across, like, hey, I'm going to get the ball, and he comes and he drops it. It just people who know me and followed me last year know that Fleener is not one of my favorite guys. But all that aside, for DFS, yeah, he's he should see more volume this week, and maybe he's got the drops behind him. We'll see.
How about min price Zach Miller on FanDuel? He's only 4,500.
No, not even on my radar.
All right. And Charles Clay, Jared Cook, Jason Witten, Jermaine Gresham, any low-priced guys that you like? Maybe a Julius Thomas at 2,800 on DraftKings with Jay Cutler. Cutler likes tight ends.
Yeah, I could see that. I don't know that I would attack the Chargers at the tight end spot so much. I hadn't looked that deep as far as Thomas is concerned. If I felt that the Rams had, like someone like a Tyler Higbee involved in the offense more, I would go there. I mentioned that I'm high on that game, and we said earlier, Jordan Reed is going to come in really low on this week. Nobody's going to be talking about him, and he's arguably the Redskins or this Cousins' most reliable target out there. So yeah, if you want to get really deep, I would go for the tight ends that are involved heavily in the offense. But no one else that's jumping out at me, which kind of comes back to the Gronk thing this week. I think it's really important to to see get everything else set, and then say, all right, well, how much money do I have left over? And if Gronk fits, play him. If he
Yeah,
doesn't, then you're fine fading him. But yeah, if you can get him in there, plug him in.
yeah, I agree. Because well. First of all, I think me and you are gonna have a lot of Kyle Rudolph, but um, this I usually do the same thing. I put in tight end, defense, kicker on FanDuel, and make my lineup. This might be the week just to leave it blank, kind of like I do at catcher sometimes in Major League. Just leave tight end blank, fill in the rest of your lineup, and see how much money you have left. You got a lot. Pay up. Pay for Jordan Reed. Pay for Kelsey. Pay for Gronk. If you don't, we could pay down for OJ, like you said. You could pay down for Martellus Bennett, Julius Thomas, people like that. Even I don't mind Cameron Brate, the other tight end in Tampa Bay, to be honest with you. But that's the only thing that would scare me about OJ Howard. I mean, no, OJ Howard's on Chicago. Excuse me. No, OJ Howard, Tampa. Right. Yeah. So that would be the only thing that would scare me about OJ Howard is how does Brate and Howard fit in the mix together, which is what scares me about Brate. The same thing.
Yeah. It's sad. Yeah, the best tight ends this week outside of Gronk are on Monday night. So
right.
So Ingram and Ebron.
Yeah, there you go. All right, let's move on. Get this wrapped up with some defense. Unless you want me to, yeah, let's just run into defense here, and then maybe I'll mention a kicker or two. We've got the Oakland defense. We touched on them a little bit, playing the Jets. It's so funny. Going into last week, we talked about Mariota and how Tennessee was a great play against the crappy Oakland defense. Then Oakland, they did pretty good, and now they're going against the Jets, and they're like everyone's number one defense this week.
Yeah. The Oakland defense. The question with the Jets is how much are they going to throw? Because I actually want a defense against a team that's going to throw the ball some. Khalil Mack, this example should get a ton of sacks if they throw the ball. It's hard to get the sacks if they're not throwing it much. And, that was part of the problem why, in hindsight, the Houston defense last week, and I was looking at a little bit of narrative, but it was actually a stupid play because we picked on Jacksonville because of Blake Bortles. Well, newsflash, they're not throwing the ball anymore. They got two big running backs that they're going to run with over and over and over again. So it seemed like defense going up against Jacksonville was actually no longer a good play because they don't have the opportunities to get those sacks, which is what we need for defenses, right? And as soon as they give up 10 points, you're done.
Right.
That's my only concern with Oakland this week is I don't see the Jets throwing it much. I don't see the Niners throwing it much in that game against Seattle, who I think is going to be popular as well. And, I mentioned earlier, I kind of like Carolina if you want to pay up as well, but not strong enough for me to get off of Oakland. So I guess long short what I'm saying here is in that top tier, I'm going on FanDuel pricing here first. The Seattles, the Oaklands, the Carolinas, Arizona, sure. Denver.
Right.
To me, it's either Oakland or I drop down to someone like Denver. Other than that, I'm going to go pay in the mid-tier or down tier for defense and look for a team that's at home and has a high upside like the Baltimore. Someone like Pittsburgh even against Minnesota. You can see we mentioned it's going to be a high-scoring game, but I can see Pittsburgh getting, forcing a couple turnovers, getting a couple sacks on Bradford. That Minnesota, look, the Saints don't have a good pass rush, so the offensive line for Minnesota looked pretty good. But last year, Bradford took a beating, and I think Pittsburgh could get to him. And I'm not saying that Pittsburgh's going to shut them out, but Pittsburgh could score a lot. It's kind of like the pitcher in baseball who strikes out, 12 guys but gives up 3 solo home runs. Well, I could live with the solo home runs because he struck out 12 guys.
Right. You touched on my Baltimore Ravens. After watching Cincinnati, I was not high on the Ravens going into the game against Cincinnati. I was actually higher on Cincinnati's defense. Then watching Cincinnati on Thursday night, I know it was a Thursday game, But was Baltimore's defense are they improved again? Are they a good defense again, or was it more the Bengals stink and that's what happened? But they are in a great spot. I think they're going to be popular for sure this week with Cleveland coming in at the home game. Ravens always do well, or usually do well against Cleveland. So they're going to be popular, but definitely I could see playing Baltimore.
Well, the thing with the Ravens, and I feel like this was the case with the Chiefs as well. These were two teams who, whenever they were at home, and I know the Chiefs just lost Eric Berry, which is a huge loss, but whenever they were at home last year, they were assured of getting a double-digit score because they're getting those sacks and they're getting a couple turnovers and they're not giving up, 30 to 40 points. And they're both priced. I mean, the Chiefs are almost mid-price on FanDuel. Well, not quite mid-price, but they're down there. They're affordable. And the Ravens are even at a little bit discount over there as well. So I think that's enough. And plus, you look at Baltimore against Cleveland, who I think is going to pound it with Crowell. They should get 2 to 3 sacks. And they're not. I don't think anybody thinks that they're going to give up in the 30s here. So that's kind of where I'm leaning on this. I get that Oakland's going to be chalk, and last week was weird because we saw, I don't know, was it like 5 defenses that scored?
There was 6 or 8 maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way that happens again this week, right? So it was a situation last week where if your defense didn't score, you were done. Right. Which is kind of funny that we spent all this time arguing over quarterback, running back, receiver, and that had the wrong defense, so I'm done. I don't think we're going to get that this week. I think it's going to be more middle of the road, and you want the value defenses on both sides this week.
Well, let's touch on one more. Tampa Bay. Do you have any love for Tampa Bay? I kind of do. With the added time off, I think it's going to be more of a preparation thing than a rust thing. What do you think about the Tampa Bay Bucks?
Yeah, it's not a bad matchup. Their defense never excites me too much, but I'm just checking their price on FanDuel. I can do it on FanDuel. On DK, I would look at Tampa Bay and Jacksonville in that same range, and I said, man, Jacksonville's defense looked a lot better last week. Going up against Tennessee, Mariota is still prone to throwing a couple interceptions, so I would actually pivot off of Tampa on DK and onto Jacksonville there, or Pittsburgh, who's basically the same price.
Yeah, I'm interested to see Jacksonville's ownership going against a better offense this week. I mentioned, last week how great play they were against Tom Savage in Houston. Obviously, I mean, we didn't expect 10 sacks, but I'm interested to see how they'll do at home versus Tennessee, and if they can get Fournette going, are they just going to lean on him and see what the defense can do? And that's interesting. I mentioned the Rams before. I kind of like the Rams at home with Washington. Kirk Cousins can make some mistakes, and the Rams defense looked pretty good last week. Any love for the Rams at all?
Yeah, a ton. I something about the game. I think the Rams are going to be a sneaky team this year. So I do like the Rams, and you hit on good points there where Cousins can leave one up to get picked off, especially on the road. The past couple of years he's been far worse on the road. The other one, just to kind of talking it through here, is I hate Arizona. I want no part of their offense. The Colts defense has got to bounce back, and they got to find a way to keep it close. And I know that they're lacking a little bit on talent, but a lot of the reason to dislike the Colts is for their offense. The defense at times last year, found ways to score. And I look at Arizona without David Johnson, and I think Carson Palmer has a dead arm. I don't see them moving the ball at all. And Palmer doesn't move well, so they're going to get to him. They're going to get a couple sacks. He can easily put one up there to get picked off and return to the house. So you want a mid-price defense on both sides? Go the Colts.
That's a great take there. Yeah, exactly. And you're going to get them super low ownership. And it's a defense we're talking about, one of the most volatile positions scoring in fantasy. You know, most of the times you need a defense that scores a touchdown to win a GPP. Most of the time. Well, you know what? Those are the least things that you can predict. You know, you can predict sacks to a degree. You can't predict turnovers, or maybe you could say, oh, they might get a turnover, but a return touchdown, a pick six, those are things that are very hard to predict. So that's a great point there. I did want to mention one other one. 2 years ago they had no teams. Now LA's got two teams, and they probably can't even fill half a stadium. But the Chargers versus Miami and Jay Cutler. Any love for the Chargers? I kind of like them.
Yeah, you said you can't predict pick sixes unless it's Cutler or Bortles, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, they got two studs in Bosa and Ingram. With Verrett being out, I'm a little bit worried there. But the Chargers, they were kind of a trendy team last year that people picked a lot on the defensive side. It was something about having a 4 o'clock defense that I think a lot of people like to have. But yeah, I wouldn't hate it. The thing with defense is I'll try to, and in my write-up, I'll narrow it down to probably just 3 or 4 defenses. Because you like to just take one, find if it's priced properly, and lock it in on both sides. So interesting thing here. Would you go Chargers or Rams this week?
You know, Verrett out. I might go Rams.
I think I am too.
Yeah.
Over the overs. I still call them San Diego. So
yeah. Any other defenses that you wanted to touch on?
Nope.
All right.
I was going to joke and say Falcons, but no.
Well, I said I wasn't going to do this, but I will touch, since we do have listeners who play FanDuel, on kickers very briefly. A couple I wanted to mention were Phil Dawson at min price, Cairo Santos at 4,600, Blair Walsh at 4,600, and then the kickers in those high-scoring games, Will Lutz, Matt Bryant, Gostkowski, and Crosby are all kickers I could see playing. Advice to people on kickers. I know you're going to have some as well, but I always play them in the high-scoring games. If you're not stacking up the quarterbacks and receivers in that game on FanDuel, play the kickers in the high-scoring games, because it's not going to be all touchdowns. If someone scores 40 points, there's going to be field goals in there.
Yeah, so high-scoring games, good stadiums,
good weather.
Good weather. I mean, there are certain kickers who do poorly in certain stadiums. Most notably, I think it was Hauschka when he was with Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't kick in Arizona. I mean, for the life of me, he couldn't kick. You're like, dude, it's a dome. It's Arizona. The ball should fly. No, couldn't kick there.
Right.
I avoid kickers a lot of times in Pittsburgh. I mean, it's like the worst stadium in the world to kick in.
Not to mention they go for 2.
Yeah, exactly. So you can kind of filter through and almost get to the point where you look at the same guys each week.
I totally agree.
And the one thing I hate is people are like, oh, I'll just take the cheapest guy. And I see people doing this on Twitter, and these are the people who are bitching about let's get rid of kickers. Same people that say get rid of catchers. I'm like, no, you just don't say that it's random, okay? Because there is some actual logic that goes into it. The scoring is stupid, right? I shouldn't get 5 points for a field goal when my quarterback throws a touchdown and gets 4. That is stupid. But that's it. It's not random.
Exactly.
So my favorite guy this week actually is Justin Tucker. Because the other statistic I look at with kickers is I look for recent form, almost a little bit with golfers too. So a guy who is good, that's coming off maybe not a bad week, but just kind of an average week, is, to me, I played a little bit of the correcting of the mean here. So I like Tucker a lot. But you mentioned the high-scoring games. Cairo Santos is another one. I think that's going to be a high-scoring game. You mentioned Will Lutz; he's a good spot. And then if the Saints can keep, if you're going Gronk, don't go Goskowski. But if you find you get the kicker, and you're like, man, I don't have Gronk, I don't have Cooks, or even Cooks is fine, but I don't have the New England running backs. Look at Goskowski.
Right.
I mean, New England's going to move the ball. But the one thing the Saints don't do, they don't force you to punt. So the Patriots should either be scoring touchdowns or attempting field goals in this game. And, nobody's going to take him at 5,100 on FanDuel. And
You're talking to the wrong guy because I love Tucker, Raven fan, and I am a point fan, and I love points, and Tucker scores points, and couple that with the fact that the Ravens' offense tends to stall quite a bit, that he gets the opportunities, and the fact that John Harbaugh is not afraid to let him kick from 60 yards. He will let him go. Some of these coaches who have these average kickers or kickers that are good from under 50, they get to the 50, 51, 55 yards out. They're not going to let their kickers do it. They're going to go for it. But the Ravens have no problem letting Tucker kick those long bombs. So that's a great point.
And I think the weather's going to be fun in that game.
Back to that real quick. When you're picking, we just said it. Those are some of the key things. Pick high score kickers in high scoring games. Good weather, domes, especially as we get later in the season. Don't go picking a guy who's supposed to be wind and rain. That just doesn't make any sense. And there is completely the odds. It's not just a random thing at that point.
Yep.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of our NFL podcast. Remember to sign up for Scout DFS. We got a great price of only $24.95 going right now. That includes the Optimizer, proprietary Scout scores. Get all of mine, Steve Renner, Sean Childs articles. So go ahead and sign up for Scout DFS. Hit us on Twitter. And good luck this week. Hope we can make you a lot of money, or at least enough money to keep playing next week.
Damn straight.
All right. For Steve Renner, SD Chickens, and myself, Fuego Steve, we are out of here.
Later.